Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lonely Wrist. Today we have my buddy RT from Vortic and Coaco. Coaco is what we are calling your second watch brand, Colorado Watch Company. So this is going to be a very special one because we're getting the 2-for-1 special. So introduce yourself.
Love it. Well, yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it, and always excited to do another podcast. I do a bunch of these, but the story comes out differently every time, and the story changes, every month at this point. And now we have two brands. So yeah, my name is RT Custer. I run and have run Vortic Watch Company here in Fort Collins, Colorado, for 10 years at this point. We started in 2014 with the simple idea of, can we make a watch in America, like truly American made? And we stumbled on the history of the great American watch companies who manufactured pocket watches way back in the day, about 100 years ago, and decided to upcycle those, turn them into wristwatches, and make one-of-a-kind wristwatches out of antique American pocket watches, and a truly American-made wristwatch all in the process. So we've been doing that for about 10 years. And the good and maybe bad thing about that whole business concept is that we can't make very many. And so about a year ago, we decided that we wanted to run a bigger business than just a few hundred pocket watch conversions every year. And my business partner, Tyler, and I started Colorado Watch Company, or did you say Coaco?
Coaco is.
We can't use CWC. That's a thing already. But yeah, Colorado Watch Company. And we launched that on Kickstarter in October of 23, and it took off right away. And we're manufacturing all of those watches right now. And yeah, we're about to run 2 watch companies. So it's a wild ride, and it's been a fun journey. So I'm excited to get into it.
So it's safe to say that your life revolves around watches.
It's safe to say that I think about work and business all the time, but to me, they say if you love what you do, you don't work a minute in your life. And I love what I do. So, this doesn't feel like work for me, and I get to do this. I don't have to do this. And so, like I said, I'm just excited to be here and very grateful that, I'm sitting in an 8,000 square feet building that we own, and we're making watches here in this building. And that's pretty dope.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We're gonna have to come down to Colorado. I'm in Vegas. I know you were just here, like a few weeks ago, and for whatever reason we didn't get a chance to meet. But
yeah, sorry about that. I was there meeting with Abingdon.
She told
who I know well, and and yeah, we I was there for less than 24 hours, which is probably the right way to do Vegas. I've been told.
Fast and Furious.
Yeah, I had like one drink. I spent maybe 45 minutes at the poker tables. And yeah, I was just there having a meeting with her. We're talking about all kinds of fun stuff that I can't talk about yet, but will be really cool when we can.
Did you leave Vegas with money in your pocket, or is it safe to say you came out a winner, or did Vegas take you to the cleaners?
No, yeah. The last time I was in Vegas last year, I came out a winner for the first time. I left with over $1,000 more than I came with, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
That's
nice.
I hit it on roulette big one time, so that was cool.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, this time I probably lost $300 in 30 minutes, and then I was just like, you know what? This isn't fun. I'm gonna go do something else.
You have an extreme amount of fun, and then you have not fun at all, and you're like, I don't know if I'm built for this.
Yeah. Well, but hey, the house always wins. So
whatever you and Abington are working on, I'm sure we'll hit it big, and then you can just chalk it up in the L of the P&L.
Yeah. If we can have a line item for gambling, that I don't know if my investors would appreciate that, but
probably not.
But meals and entertainment, I think is probably where I'd put some gambling money.
Tell us briefly, obviously, about the concept of Vortic. Like, where was the light bulb moment where you guys were like, "Hey, we're just gonna repurpose old watches," because not a lot of people are doing that.
Totally. So we had Tyler Wolf as my business partner. He and I started Vortic and had the idea on a golf course at Penn State, technically in like 2011. the initial idea was very different than what we do now. We basically were trying to we had a bunch of ideas surrounding the concept of making a watch that was more comfortable to wear while you played golf. Because he wears a watch all the time. He doesn't want to take his watch off when he plays golf. I always took my watch off before I started playing golf, or really any activity. Honestly, I just felt like it was easier to swing my arms around, whether it's golf or tennis or whatever. Pickleball at this point, would be the thing I would take my watch off to do. And so it just started a really interesting conversation on the golf course that day about, like, I just asked him a ton of questions about, like, how can you wear a watch when you play golf? How do you make it tight enough but not too tight? And we had all these really interesting ideas about just making a more comfortable watch. And then we hit the drawing board, like, a week or two later, and said, like, okay, if we're going to try to make a watch, and we start a watch company, what are the values we want to have? What are the things we want to accomplish? How do we want to make it? And one of the biggest things is we wanted to make it in America. That was right around the time that Shinola was getting started. They were obviously really popular from the beginning. And we said, like, let's make whatever watch we make, let's make it in the USA, and quickly realized that that's nearly impossible, and still 10 years later, almost still impossible. And pretty much everyone was like, yeah, if you want to start a watch company, you go to China or Switzerland. Like, those are your two things. And you can get movements there. And that's really the hardest part, is no one makes a movement or even movement components in America, especially at scale, because whatever we did, we wanted to make at least hundreds, but ideally thousands of watches. Like, we wanted to run a big company and be fun. And one of the people we asked for advice was someone at a pawn shop who basically told us that America used to be the Switzerland of the world from about 1850 to 1950, and over 150 million pocket watches were manufactured in the USA back then. Wow. And we had no idea. And most people have absolutely no idea that pocket watches were made in America, or that America made some of the best timekeeping components in the entire world, especially in the early 1900s. And fast forward to today, and this guy ran a pawn shop. He said, there's, pawn shops especially are scrapping pocket watches for the gold and silver of the case, and the movement, which is the part that we needed, was literally trash, like worth $0 to most of the world.
Wow.
And so that's when the light bulb went off. It's just like, okay, well, if we can upcycle or use these old 100-year-old pocket watches, they were made in America back then. So we checked that box. We have an American-made movement. They need some love. And then we can make the bigger stuff, the cases. I studied engineering at Penn State, and had some connections in, like, the 3D printing department, especially metal 3D printing. And so we were like, okay, we can 3D print at least, but we can probably manufacture the case and the crown and these bigger components on the outside. And if the movement's American and we can make the modern parts on the outside in America, that's an American-made watch. And so we put that idea on Kickstarter in 2014 when we moved to Colorado, and the rest is history, guys. I mean, we've sold every watch we made since. Like, we got really lucky. We had a really cool idea, and we certainly were not the first people to take a pocket watch and make it a wristwatch, but I think we were the first company to, like, build an entire brand and basically an entire company around that concept, and go all in on that concept. And now, I mean, it's one of the things we didn't think about was people sending us family heirloom pocket watches. But now that's a huge part of our business. If you Google anything about American pocket watches, or what do I do with grandpa's pocket watch, or how do I open a pocket watch, you're going to see everything about Vortic, because we're really the only company that, like, went all in on, we can take grandpa's pocket watch and make it a wristwatch. And we do that all the time for families all around the world. And it's just an honor to be part of that process. Plus, we obviously make our own and sell them direct. So, just a fun business to run.
Yeah, that's super unique. I love how personal that is as well, and that not only have you guys taken your love for it and created, your own products per se, but you're also helping people kind of rekindle that love for their timepieces, which is a fantastic thing. I'm curious, RT. Let's talk about your newest venture with the Kawako, as Blake talked about. I know you guys said that y'all started that back up in late 2020, 2023. But how's everything going? I know you said you're in the manufacturing process of everything. How's that going for you guys?
Yeah, thanks. So taking 2 steps back, basically the problem with Vortic is that we can make about 300 watches a year. And we call them the American Artisan Series. And within that 300 or so includes us taking people's, grandparents' pocket watches and making them wristwatches. So we're not really making and selling very many wristwatches in a year. And they're thousands of dollars, but still it's not a very big business. And in order to get to where we've gotten to, and in order to manufacture those products the right way, taking a pocket watch that's 100 years old and turning it into a wristwatch is really hard. It's one of the hardest things in the world, and I do not recommend doing it. But we've done it for 10 years and we figured it out, right? And the reason we figured it out is because we are a manufacturing company. We are not a watch company. So in this building is millions of dollars of CNC machines, which are huge machines that take a chunk of metal and cut it out and turn it into wristwatch components. We've had to do all that ourselves and bring that in-house using our own engineers, our own designers, our own watchmakers that sit right through this right through this wall from me. We do almost everything right here in this building for Vortic Watch Company. And that's out of pure necessity, because when you only make a couple hundred of something a year, no manufacturing company on earth is going to be like, yeah, sure, we'll make just 100 of those little tiny parts that have to be perfect every time. It's just not a thing. We've tried so many different ways to honestly just delegate some of this work and outsource it to great manufacturing companies, and there's a lot of them, even in the US. But if I, for my military edition, for instance, I only need 50 of these crowns every year, and we change the design a little bit every year. And to ask somebody who runs a big manufacturing company with a machine, a Swiss turning center is hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not going to say, yeah, we'll just make you 50 of those, real quick. That's not a thing. So we have all that here now, and it's taken us 10 years to amass all that equipment and all that knowledge and engineering and the ability to manufacture all those parts, but we can only make a few hundred watches a year. So we said, well, instead of trying to put a square peg in a round hole and trying to get Vortic to 500, 1,000 watches a year, because it's really hard. We've kind of tried. Why don't we keep Vortic where it is, keep it really special, keep, quality way over quantity, and just make the coolest damn pocket watches turned into wristwatches in the entire world, and make only a couple hundred a year, and then start another brand and use all our manufacturing, capabilities that we've learned, and all the team and the equipment that we have here to make a fully modern watch and basically pose a new question. And that's what we did on Kickstarter. Is we posed a slightly different question. Instead of with Vortic, how do we make 100% of the watch in America no matter what? The question that we posed on Kickstarter in late 2023 was, how do we make as much of the watch in America as possible, but keep the price like around $1,000, at least the starting price for one of the products, and in order to do that and keep the price down, but keep the quality high, and do what we wanted to do, especially in a mechanical watch, we wanted to make something that was automatic. We needed scale, and we had the ability to scale here, but it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. You either need a bunch of capital and to get to where we are, or you needed to take pre-orders, something like that. And so that's why we use Kickstarter again, to just kind of say, hey world, do you want an American made watch at scale, for a really good price and a really good value? And we set our goal at 250,000, which was a risk, because to make $250,000 in 30 days is a challenge. That's a big goal, especially for any new company. But we were pretty confident, because we've been doing Vortic for a while, that like just our customer base maybe can make up half of that. And yeah, we made $350,000 in 30 days. That equates to about 300 watches, because some of the watches are a little more than 1,000 and some of them are about 1,000. And that's our Kickstarter only prices, where our prices are going to have to go up, because as you might imagine, it's going to cost more to make these than we thought.
Yeah.
Now that we're getting into it. But yeah, that was the concept, and that's what we're doing now. We decided after Kickstarter was over, so when we ended Kickstarter in November of, or I guess late October of last year, we had all these other ideas to make the product even better, and we wanted to make some changes to it. And so the products that the people are going to get when they backed us on Kickstarter are exponentially better and more, just way cooler than they even bought. So we're just going to blow these people's minds. We're really, really excited about it. And for that reason, we're not taking any other pre-orders or pre-sales or anything like that for Colorado Watch Company until we start shipping the orders to Kickstarter backers. And we're doing that for two reasons. One is because we want to make sure everyone knows what they're buying, and we made some changes to the product since Kickstarter. And I want to have final product images and stuff like that of this is exactly what you're buying when you're pre-ordering them or ordering them in the future. And two is just in integrity. You know, we want to do what we said we were going to do, and we said we are going to make watches for all these people that pre-ordered. You know, at this point, it'll be 6 months until they get their watch, and so I want to make sure they feel really, really good about it. And you know, honestly, I want, like, of those 300 watches, I want 300 5-star reviews and people just saying like, this is the coolest watch ever, and buying another one. You know, like you can't buy that kind of marketing. And so I want 300 super happy customers, and I think we're going to get it. It's just going to take us a couple more months to build all of them.
That's awesome.
What I'm looking here at the Colorado Watch Company like tab, and what movement are you using? It looks a little interesting, but it doesn't say. So it says American assembled automatic movement, but
Yep.
Did you guys have like a base movement that you've retweaked, or is it something that you guys have felt like you needed to design? Or
No, it's a great question. So we use a company down in Arizona called
TMI?
Fine Timepiece Solutions.
or-
Fine Timepiece Solutions is we call them FTS, but they assemble movements and watches. They're basically an assembly organization. So they specialize in the assembly of very small and precise things like watches, but they do other things too. And they assemble that movement in Arizona. And that movement is something that they worked with a huge company in India called Titan Watch Company to design. So that movement is designed in the US for that company, manufactured overseas, mostly in India, but we say some of the components come from Asia because we just don't know, and you know, most people don't know.
Yeah.
Some of the components are probably coming from Switzerland and Germany as well. Like Switzerland and Germany kind of have a lockdown on springs and jewels and some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, globally sourced components assembled in Arizona. The movement is not based on a Swiss movement or a Japanese movement of any kind. It's its own thing. They call it the AmeriCron, and it is the most American movement at scale. You have to say at scale because, you know, obviously RGM and J.N. Shapiro and Weiss and some of these other guys, they're making movements in America, which is awesome, but not at scale. We need someone who can make thousands of movements, because the only way to get to what we want to do with Colorado Watch Company is to sell thousands of watches a year. I want to take on Shinola, you know, plain and simple. Like there's a hole in that market for a truly American made watch, as American as possible, in that like $1,000 to $2,000 price point. And that's what Colorado Watch Company is all about, and that's what we're trying to get.
I wouldn't say, and it sounds like you're coming out on record, so I'm going to come out on record. I wouldn't say watch enthusiasts like go after a brand like Shinola, you know, because it seems like it's a watch brand for people that aren't into watches. You know, I could be wrong, and especially considering the way that they're trying to target new customers, you know, the same way you are, like going to these wind up events and everything, trying to get their name out there in front of the micro brand space. But I mean, I could be wrong, but I personally don't think about Shinola as like a micro brand, and I certainly don't think of them as an enthusiast brand as well, you know?
Sure. And when I say take on Shinola, I mean from a business standpoint.
Yeah,
you know,
for
selling tens of thousands of watches that are, you know, at least built in America, and in their price point. You know, like they live in that $800 to $2,000 price point, and And to me, that's the sweet spot from a business standpoint. You're absolutely right from like an enthusiast standpoint. The other thing that I always like, without talking about any other companies, the biggest thing that we want to accomplish with Colorado Watch Company is transparency and integrity, because the consumer, whether you're a wristwatch enthusiast or a customer that just wants to buy a nice watch, you're doing a lot more research now than ever before. And there's a lot more information out there than ever before, especially on how and where watches are made. So there's a lot of people that know that to be Swiss made, only 60% of that watch, the cost, needs to come from Switzerland. And a lot of times that's basically the assembly. And so there's a lot of Swiss made watches out there that say made in Switzerland, that basically are just built or assembled, in Switzerland. And there are a fair amount, a big number, unfortunately, of American companies who have gotten slapped on the wrist from the Federal Trade Commission for saying stuff about made in USA and all that kind of stuff. So in Colorado Watch Company, we say built in the USA because we can't technically say made in America, but we are extremely transparent about everything that we do. So 87% of the cost of a Colorado watch is American. And no one is going to tell you that number. Almost no company is going to tell you that number, even if you ask. And that number is going to be all over our website. It's all over the Kickstarter. We even have a layout on Kickstarter where we say, we have little arrows that say, like, this case is made in Colorado. This gasket is coming from Asia. This movement is assembled in Arizona using foreign components. Cool. Like, we are ridiculously transparent, because all of that should be a conversation. Like, that's fun. That's a really fun conversation that I want my customers to have with their friends and say, like, did you know this was built in the USA? Like, this is almost entirely made in America. And then they're going to be, I was like, well, which parts are made here and which parts aren't? And most of the time you can't answer that question as a consumer. If you buy a Colorado watch, you will most certainly can. You can pull up a diagram if you want at the dinner table and show your friends where all this stuff is made. And we just think that's the right thing to do. And we're backing it up by saying, hey, if you don't believe us, come to Colorado and we'll show you. And we do tours of this facility here in Fort Collins, Colorado all the time. And we're going to do videos and YouTube videos all the time with, like, here's how we're making the case. Here's how we're making the crown. Here's how we're making the dials. We just got a pad printer so we can make our own dials here in Colorado. It's cool. And we just went back to the basics of just like, hey, we do cool stuff, so let's just hit record and share it with everybody. Why not?
Yeah. Sounds like we're going to have to take a trip to Fort Collins to do a factory tour video, because we have a pretty new-ish YouTube channel. And so I recently just got back from Switzerland last week, and I was filming content with Zenith and Beauvais.
Nice.
And Panerai.
Yeah, we're both filmmakers and photographers.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, I come from filmmaking, and Justin comes from photography.
Yeah,
but
we have a whole TV studio up here, so you guys are welcome anytime. You can hang out. We can talk about making some cool content. Did you get to see how they make Panerai cases?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that's where we want to. They have some machines that are like the machines that we have are kind of like. Yeah, well, exactly. Like the machines that we have are like Mercedes maybe level. Like they have like Ferrari and Lamborghini machines, that are super custom and awesome. So yeah, we're on our way there, but it's going to take a while.
The only thing that they don't produce in-house, from my understanding, is Gold Tech, because of the value of the raw material. So like they were showing like the titanium, steel, E-steel, and Carbotech. And I mean, it was crazy to see like the different machining processes, and they show you the raw materials, right? And they show you like what the case looks like before it is even a case, and how the CNC machine like cuts it all out. I mean, it was super cool. Sadly,
and we do that all the time.
Sadly, they didn't let me do like a factory video, like I did for Zenith and Beauvais, because I think that they were running some watches for Watches and Wonders. So yeah, I was going through, and then like I went to they were doing like some of the pressure testing, and then they pulled like maybe like 90 watches out of the pressure tester, And I was like, I have never seen these watches before. Oh,
Yeah.
and they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, these are on embargo, and they're not yet produced.
Totally.
So yeah, it just kind of, it could be the reason, but no. Panerai is very open for stuff like that. So if you're ever in Neuchâtel, I mean, I'm sure they'd be happy to welcome you. I don't know if it's just Panerai customers or what or whatever. Um, but also, I got the opportunity to sit down with the chief operating officer.
Cool.
So his name's Jerome. He's super, super, super nice. And they're very
Awesome.
open. And for me, like I see a lot of people hate on Panerai because they're like, oh, Panerai is not a real watchmaker, and that's kind of the word that's been going around. But
Yeah.
if you walk through the tour, in between, like they have like the high horology watchmaking benches, and then they have
Yeah.
the normal watchmaking benches. They have something called the Jupiterium or something. So essentially, I'll send you a picture of it. But essentially, it's got a mechanical movement at the bottom, and then it's got a Panerai movement. It's a 40-day power reserve, and it tracks all the stars in the sky, made by
That's
Panerai.
cool. That's super
And like,
cool. Well, yeah. To say they're not a real watchmaker, like,
silly.
yeah, I don't want to get into, like, you can't even,
I know.
it's that's like some comments on Instagram posts. It's just like, okay, I'm going to delete that comment. Like, there's
know.
no way to have a logical conversation with an argument like that. And that's why I say, whenever I talk about Vortic, especially, like, Tyler and I are hardly engineers, like I'm an industrial engineer, which my friends always called an imaginary engineer, because a lot of my friends went to Disney, and we did most like imagineers at Disney, right? Like I did logistics and supply chain stuff, and he studied mathematics in college, but he taught himself how to use all these CNC machines on YouTube. And I do all of our marketing, and my expertise is email marketing. And email marketing at last year was 70% of our revenue. And so, like, we are really good at what we do, and we are not, neither one of us is a watchmaker, but we run a watch company, and we have expert watchmakers that work with us, and for us. But, like, yeah, to say that Vortic isn't a watch company, it's like, okay, just come to Colorado, let me show you, and like when we finish the tour, just let me ask you that question again. And I'm sure
you otherwise.
Well, and anyone that would say that about Panerai, they just need to take that tour you did, and then it'll be like, okay, yep, I'm so sorry. You make cool shit. I love Panerai too. Like, if I have to buy a Panerai to take a tour, I'm in. I'll do it.
I really like this. There's this new modern vintage looking radio mirror that just came out, and it's got like the tropical dial, and it's only 300
Cool.
pieces, and it's like $5,400. I'm like shit.
That's
see,
that's the thing about Panerai, is that their prices are really reasonable, I think, for what they make.
Sometimes,
well, I mean, any generality
for that
is
one,
gonna
get
you in trouble.
Yeah.
But like, they've done some stuff like that where I'm just like, man, like, I sell watches for more than that. And then like, these, it's just different. So
to get a 300-piece limited edition that they'll never make again, that is a 45 miller Radomir that has a chocolate patina like tropical style dial, like, it just seems like to me it's going to be a future collectible.
For sure.
Yeah. But let's bring it back to you. We could talk about a million other brands. This is your podcast. This is your space. How do you modernize vintage watches? So obviously you probably get your vintage watch in, and then you probably get something that's maybe not working, and then you're like, oh, this part doesn't work. Like, then what? Like, how do you approach that problem?
Yeah. So first of all, because they made so many pocket watches back then, we can cherry pick the best of the best pocket watches ever made. And so when I go out and I buy pocket watches, which most of the time I'm buying from estate auctions, and a lot of people are mildly familiar with the estate industry. Somebody passes away, jewelry store, pawn shop goes out of business, and somebody comes in, writes them a check for the whole store, the whole thing, and says, hey, I'm just going to take everything. Here's a good amount of money. You don't have to touch it. You know, the grieving family or whatever doesn't have to worry about going through all their grandparents stuff. And these people come in and they find what's valuable, and then they sell the Rolex to somebody, they sell the diamonds to somebody else, they sell all the precious metal, gold, silver, and all that stuff to somebody else. And then afterwards, at the end of that estate process, when they're going through everything, it's like, okay, we have a box of old pocket watches. The heck are we going to do with this? You know, nobody wants pocket watches anymore. So estate buyers either take those to pawn shops or take those to, gold and silver stores and melt down the cases and basically throw away the movements, which sucks. It just it happens all the time because a lot of people still don't know that we do what we do, and they just throw them away.
Crazy.
Or they work with one of my friends, which is an estate auctioneer. And so these estate auction companies, one of them's in Manchester, New Hampshire, and they basically go to these estate buyers, and they take everything that they couldn't sell or they need a new outlet for, and they buy like 100 different estates worth of things, take them all into this big warehouse, and then auction them off. So they'll still find like a really rare pocket watch or a really rare Rolex or something like that, and they'll auction it off on their website. And then again, they are too left with all these pocket watches, and they don't know what to do with. A lot of loose movements, a lot of pocket watches that are cool, but they're not collectible. And all of those people have my business card, and they're like, "Hey, RT, we got like 200-300. How many you want to buy? I put a few aside for Vortic. I know what you're looking for." And so I go to Boston, New Hampshire, Chicago a couple times a year and buy a few hundred pocket watches at a time. And I'm cherry picking from what they have, and then my team, our watchmakers, cherry pick from what I buy. And so we're already getting the best of the best movement. And then we start the restoration process. And to your point, we always have something that's missing. They're missing a lot of them, almost all of them. We need to replace the springs, hairspring, mainspring. I mean, it's 100 years old. The spring isn't meant to last that long. So there's some parts like that we have to replace with either new old stock or like a replica part. And so we do our best to keep them all original as much as possible and keep the movements, dials, and hands at least all the same, and then use an authentic component like an authentic new old stock mainspring or a remake of a mainspring that's exactly the same as the Waltham Watch Company mainspring from 100 years ago. And we restore them. We don't just clean and oil and adjust them. It's a full restoration process on these old pocket watches. We make them tick and work and tell time just as well as they did 100 years ago. And then we put them in our cases that were designed to preserve them for another 100 years.
Go ahead, Blake.
I can just already imagine the headache because I just got a Speedmaster Mark II serviced, and it took them like 3 or 4 weeks to find like a gasket or some shit.
Yep.
It's like something that's stupid, like a little rubber gasket,
Yep.
So I feel
well, and and then you think about so a lot of people say that with any. I don't care what watchmaker you go to. If you have a vintage watch, and vintage is like 20, 30, 50 years old, maybe. That's hard, and Rolex made so many. Rolex and Omega are typically the brands people are talking about when they're restoring a vintage watch, and they're willing to spend whatever it costs to do it because they're so valuable. They only made so many watches, but they made a bunch of different SKUs, and they made extra spare parts, but like not that many, and I don't care how big your company is, you're not making like 100 years worth of spare parts into the future. Like
right.
you're just doing whatever you have to keep the lights on. And you're not really thinking that far out. And so now we go back to everything I deal with is antique. So we're talking the military watches that we make from like the early 1940s. That's the youngest or newest watches that we make. Most of them are from the 1910s and 1920s. And so it's literally 100 years ago. And these watchmakers or these watch manufacturing companies like Elgin, Waltham, Hamilton, I call them the great American watch companies. They manufactured a bunch of extra parts, but again, not 100 years worth of extra parts. And so we get our spare parts from the same process, auctioneers and estates. If you're a watchmaker and you've fixed old pocket watches for 30 years and you pass away or you retire, you probably have a box of 10, 12 size Hamilton pocket watch mainsprings just sitting in a box somewhere, and I want them. I need them. So that's how we do it. And yes, it is painstaking, very difficult. And that's honestly not even the hard part. The hardest part of everything that we do is finding the people to do the work. So,
dude, you guys are creating, and you're taking Frankenstein parts, I mean, essentially, and you're making them work inside of a completely redesigned case and a completely new watch. And I just, dude, like, I can't wrap my head around like how difficult that actually must be, because everything, every movement is essentially laid out differently. You're not just working with one blueprint. There's many different blueprints. And of course, you guys employees are having to adapt to that and learn that stuff as they go. It's really impressive.
New challenges every day, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's part of why it's so hard to find people to do the work, because you have to love it. If you're a watchmaker, you can make more money going to working for Rolex and servicing the same model or same 5 models of Rolex for the rest of your life, and you can make a great living doing that, and it's still fun. You still face new challenges every day. They're all going to be a little different, but it's basically the same thing. Versus you come to me, I can't pay as much as Rolex. I don't have any of the healthcare benefits of a big company, but every single watch you touch is a piece of American history that you're giving new life to. And if you think that's cool, then you want to come and work for us here in Colorado. And so I just need people, and thankfully there are some out there who are skilled watchmakers that are passionate about American made, passionate about, antique stuff, pocket watches, history nerds like us. Like they're far and few between, but they are out there. And I've found at least barely enough of them to keep this business going. And I think we can still find more. And that's honestly why I do podcasts like this, is to just share the good news. Like, you don't have to go work for the big companies. Like there's some startups like us that do really cool stuff. If you're a watchmaker, a machinist, or, want to do something cool.
Dude, I'll come work with you if you split some of that Closet Azul with me.
That one's empty. But over here. Yeah, that one's empty. But I got some good stuff here. So some of these are full. And yeah, if you want a few $100 bottle of tequila for your signing bonus, I'm down. That's very fair.
So something that I think about, and what is super cool, and I feel like is super unique, is of course just echoing all that you said, but recently I acquired a 1969 Rolex Datejust from my buddy. And when I got it, I was like, I want to do this right. I want this thing to be restored, right? So of course, what did I do? I sent it to Rolex. I didn't want to send it to a local watchmaker. I wanted Rolex to get their hands on it. I thought there was value, by the money that I would pay to service it at a local watchmaker. I would pay the same money at Rolex and get the Rolex service card, which of course increases the value of the watch you have. Yep. But Rolex sent it back to me claiming that they wouldn't touch it. And so they sell you on this idea of like having a watch that you can pass through generations and generations and generations. But this was a 50-year-old watch, and they wouldn't service it. And I was like, to me, that seems like bullshit, for one. It was a 1601 Datejust, which, arguably was probably the most popular Datejust. Like, you can find thousands of them on the market right now. There's a lot of inventory out there. But to me, it really kind of struck me in a bad sense that, hey, there's a possibility that this watch that I have now, that, whether it's my new watch, I've got 2 new Rolexes, like less than a year old. My children or my children's children are going to face the exact same thing that I just had in the future. And that's why I was like, man, this is so cool. It's such a cool brand. and it really resonated with me because you are legitimately breathing life into watches that it's unlikely even Hamilton or Elgin like that they would even want to get hands on with these things.
Well, those companies don't exist. I mean, the original Hamilton watch company went out of business in 1969, and the trademarks were purchased by the Swatch Group in 1972, 71 or 72. And they were the company that lasted the longest. Elgin went under in the late 50s. I think they were second longest alive, but none of those great American watch companies still operate in any way. And you definitely can't take a Hamilton Railroad pocket watch made in 1920 and send it to Switzerland today to the Swatch Group. That's not a thing. So the problem that you're talking about is a huge problem that we have in the entire world, not just America, but in America, we call it the skilled trade gap. And it's way bigger than just watches. It's people don't realize, or people don't want to be plumbers, electricians, they don't want to work with their hands. They don't know that you don't have to go to Penn State and study engineering to make 60, 80, $100,000 a year. You can make better money than that running a little electrician company in your hometown, and you can crush it and make six figures out of a van. And when you talk about watches in the watchmaking industry, it's even worse. The average age of a watchmaker in the United States is over 68 at this point, and it is literally a dying profession. And there are maybe a couple of schools. I mean, you can count the schools that we have in America on one hand. And our children, and definitely our grandchildren, are screwed. They're going to be shit out of luck if they want to service a Rolex in 20, 30, 50 years, unless we fix that problem. And so our give back, our charity is the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative, which is the only, it's one of the larger American watchmaking schools, and they teach U.S. military vets how to be watchmakers. And it's based on the Bulova, the Joseph Bulova program. So we're doing what we can, but even them, Sam there at that school, he can teach maybe 15 people at a time in one class, and the class is almost 2 years long. So unless we scale that stuff up, we're out of luck. So that's the other reason I like doing podcasts like this, is just awareness of if you love watches, and especially if you're a young person, you like watches and you're technically inclined, gosh, there's so much opportunity, not just even in watchmaking, but in building watches and running the CNC machines that I have, cutting metal and turning them into watch parts. But if you want to dedicate your life and become a watchmaker, you can make way more than people like me that were just an engineer, and got a 4-year engineering degree. Honestly, you'll make just as much as I did right out of school, and it's only a 2-year school. And people like me will pay for your school. Rolex will pay for your school for sure. So yeah, it's I could talk about that all day, so I'll stop. But
something that was interesting to me is obviously you brought up Hamilton, and Hamilton not being the same entity that it was back in the 20s and the early 18th century. But when we met originally the first time in person in Chicago, you were talking a lot about the lawsuit that happened with Hamilton, and specifically Swatch Group. Sorry. And so I'm curious maybe to get your spin on that, your side, your perspective. You told it really well, and it was a really great story. And I don't have the privilege of repacking that, but a lot of people may not know about what happened to you in your early days, because it seemed like it happened to you very quickly into your new your new brand. It seemed to be happening at the same time you were starting up a company. So it'd be interesting for you to fill the viewers in with what happened.
Totally. Yeah, I'll give you as short of a story as I can. For the whole story, you can Google Hamilton v. Vortic, because it's a federal lawsuit. All the federal documents are public. It's all public knowledge. And then you can also go to vorticwatches.com/victory, and we're producing a little series of videos, and I'm actually going to write a book about it. I don't know when. I'm way too busy to write a book, but I want to, and I will. But the long story is, or the long story tried to make short, is that, we take antique American pocket watches and turn them into wristwatches. Hamilton was one of the great American watch companies. And we leave the original dials on these pocket watches. And so none of the watches that Vortic Watch Company makes say Vortic on the front and center of the watch. They say Elgin, Illinois, Waltham, or in this case, Hamilton, right dead center on the front of the watch. And then we engrave Vortic on the back on some of the components that we make on the case. And we did not think that was a problem. We didn't know a whole lot about trademarks or intellectual property or the law at all. I mean, we were in our early 20s when we started this company, and we just assumed that we were upcycling something that was used 100 years ago, and we're actually changing the use case. We're changing it from a pocket watch to a wristwatch. And we honestly, at that point, I don't know if I knew if Hamilton was part of Swatch Group. Like, I had no idea. I was a kid. And like I said, we weren't watchmakers. We didn't grow up around watches. We were just trying to make a watch in America. That was it. So we put that idea on Kickstarter. And then after Kickstarter was successful, I used some of the money that we made on Kickstarter to buy our first magazine ad, like our first print advertisement, basically announcing the idea of our company. And it was the May-June advertisement or May-June issue of Watch Time magazine in 2015. So we launched the company technically on Kickstarter in November of 2014. Roughly 6 months later, I ran this ad in Watch Time magazine. I was super stoked about it. Watch Time, was at that time and still is the biggest magazine in the US for watches. So at the bottom, I said, here's a picture of we used a Hamilton Railroad pocket watch. We turned it into a wristwatch using Photoshop because we still at this point, we still hadn't manufactured a single watch. We were still trying to figure it out from Kickstarter. And we said, contact a watchmaker at Vortic today to design your own custom pocket watch made into a wristwatch, vorticwatches.com, whatever. I thought it was a pretty cool ad. It was different, really stood out. The Watch Time advertising team was like, oh, cool. Somebody's making pocket watch conversions like the right way, in America. Like, everyone was stoked about it. And then I got an official letter from Switzerland with a cease and desist. And we got that cease and desist about 2 months prior to shipping a single product in our company. We still had not made a single thing. And they said, you're not allowed to use our name to make money. And that's what it's all about. So they ended up, we had started what I refer to as a difficult conversation between me and a couple C-level executives at the Swatch Group that lasted 6 years. I wish I could go back and somehow find a way to talk to those people early on and say, let's just sit down and have a cup of coffee and let me just put my watches in your hand and say, I'm just a kid from America trying to do something interesting. I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania. My dad lives in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where Hamilton was. He can walk to the Hamilton factory. I have a ton of respect for Hamilton brand, and it's part of my DNA. But they sued us nonetheless. So about 2 years into the conversation, so in 2017, we were served with the official lawsuit. And then I sat in federal court in February of 2020 and defended us in the Southern District of New York with a federal judge sitting right next to me. And that's why it's all public knowledge is, a lot of U.S. government resources were deployed to defend us. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful for my attorney, Rob Lance. Shout out to Lance Law Firm, who now does a ton of wristwatch industry stuff because he's been kind of made famous. If you ever get in trouble in the watch industry, he's your guy.
You converted him.
yeah. Well, and he loves watch. He's one of our best customers now, and one of my best friends. But yeah, we found someone to fight with us, and they sued us over trademark infringement and counterfeiting. Trademark infringement was basically accusing us of using the Hamilton brand to make money, and not properly educating our consumers of what it was. It is a Hamilton, but it's not. It's 100 years old, all that stuff. And then counterfeiting, they basically accused us of altering those products and printing the Hamilton brand on the product in order to make money. You guys know, because you've seen the watches and we've had this conversation, that we don't do any of that stuff and we do it the right way. I knew that from the very beginning. My attorneys knew that from the very beginning. Everyone involved, including the federal judge, knew that this was basically just kind of bullying. But one thing I've learned about intellectual property in the law is that a trademark, a patent, any piece of intellectual property is only worth the money you have to defend it. And if you don't defend it, other people are going to use it and they're going to take advantage of it. And so I don't hold any hard feelings against Swatch or Hamilton. Like, they were doing their corporate diligence and they were doing this lawsuit because it's just part of their SOPs. You know, hey, somebody's using the Hamilton brand to make money, sue them. That's it. And it doesn't matter who you are and what you're doing. What is frustrating is that it took 6 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars and some of my hair probably.
It looks good though
to-
right now.
It's still, yeah, I think I'm going to start receding right up in here. It hasn't started yet.
I'm already there.
Yeah, it's going to happen eventually, and it's probably because of that 6 years. But it's frustrating that it took 6 years to figure it out. But the reason I want to write a book about it is because we won. So fast forward, so late 2020, we won in federal court. They appealed. We won again in appellate court, which is basically a panel of federal judges that reviews the first ruling. Again, tons of federal resources. 5 federal judges read a 40-page document that the first judge wrote about how we weren't doing anything wrong. This was all okay, and here's why. And we used a lot of arguments to prove that we're upcycling is legal. You know, and that's what it was all about. Is it's much bigger than watches and pocket watches and all that stuff. It became more about recycling and reusing and sustainability, and just like, if this is wrong, then like what else could be wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's rare that in a David and Goliath story like this, the David wins and doesn't have a muzzle. So a lot of times stuff like this is settled out of court with NDAs and all this kind of stuff. So like, I couldn't say anything that I just said. And I do have to be a little careful about what I said, because there's some of the stuff that I can't share.
Sure.
But like, most of it I can share. And if I can document this stuff on podcasts and videos, like I put on our website, and then hopefully a book, you know, if I can prevent one other person that's in their 20s starting a company from getting sued by a huge company in their industry,
you're raising the awareness.
Better. Yeah, that's just it. Plus, I think, and I talk about like a lot of our customers are small business owners and entrepreneurs, and I hear all the time, they're like, man, I heard about the lawsuit. Like, that must have been crazy. Like, you know, I got sued about 5 years ago, and here's my story and all that stuff. Like, so many people have some kind of legal issue in their life as an entrepreneur, especially, and they don't talk about it. Nobody knows. They totally bottle it up inside. And I am not afraid to say that I've done a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of talking, you know, like it about ruined my life. It about took away my relationship, you know, with my partner. It was definitely a strain on my relationship with my kids and my family. My mom died about halfway through the lawsuit, and I did not get to spend very much time with her, you know, in her final months. So like, you know, if I just think talking about all these hard things that most people don't talk about is a really healthy thing. And when you go through something like that, especially as an entrepreneur, there are lots of other people that have gone through similar things. And the biggest mistake I made was not asking for help soon enough. When I started asking for help, people came out of the woodwork and they helped. And I'm super grateful for those people. But if I kept it to myself the whole time, I would have either like really hurt myself, like physically or mentally, or I would have potentially lost the lawsuit or given up, because it was all on me. So I'm very grateful that it wasn't all on me.
Wow.
Yeah. We're glad to have you here, man. And, you know, sorry about your mother's loss halfway through that. I know that must have been probably one of the toughest times in your life. And everybody goes through hardships, and, you know, it's a beautiful thing, how humans can interact and communicate and really, you know, like you mentioned, come out of the woodwork and help each other. I've always kind of been the same way, you know, just let's try and stay humble. Don't really ask for much. And I know that ultimately a lot of people have that same, you know, backbone and support system. So it's a good thing that you had that. I'll switch gears just a little bit, RT, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So talking about, you know, taking, you know, Hamilton specifically and things like that and vintage watches, have you guys ever considered creating a new watch from the ground up with the vintage flair that Vortic is known for, but also having it under the Vortic brand. So I know that you guys do the Colorado Watch Company, and that's kind of your own take on like a new watch spin. But have you guys ever considered that under Vortic's name?
Yeah, so we are, now that we have two brands, all the or most of the fully modern stuff and all of our new ideas, most of it is going to be under Colorado Watch Company or a future brand. Like I want to build Vortic into a little swatch group of sorts, and have several brands that we run. That's kind of the goal, all focused on American made. That's really the business plan in a nutshell. But we do, to answer your question, we do have one idea that we've been toying with to basically position Vortic as not just pocket watch conversions, but high-end, really well-made custom watches designed and built in Colorado. And we got our hands on some really cool Swiss movements that look like the old pocket watch movements. They're like really, really highly decorated.
Nice.
And they were decorated just for us. And we dreamed of being able to make our own dials. And now that we started making our own dials and we got a pad printer for Colorado Watch Company, my business partner Tyler has been working on some really interesting dials. And for this, one thing that we've learned, especially by taking old pocket watches and making them wristwatches, is the dial is what sells the watch. I mean, people just love, it's like a little canvas. It's a little work of art that's on your wrist, and there's so many things you can do with it, and they're all different. So Tyler's got some really cool ideas with either Grand Few enamel, which hasn't really been done recently, or all kinds of really vibrant different colors that you can do on our machines and with our processes that we use now that don't really fit the aesthetic of a pocket watch turned into wristwatch. And because we use the old dials, where we kind of get what we get. But we call that concept the Journeyman series. Play on words with the word journeyman, as far as like literally like learning as you go and like trying new things to see what works and like hopefully something pans out. And then literally on a journey to like, let's make as much of this stuff in America as we can. And let's learn as much as we can along the way to, again, try to create more cool jobs for people that want to work with their hands and make stuff like we do. So we call that the Journeyman series, and we're hoping to come out with a few, like there'll be like 5-piece limited edition runs, if that makes sense. In a very similar style to a Vortic watch. Like we call it an industrial Americana, like our design style, the cases and stuff. And a little smaller, and then obviously modern movements, so we can like, focus more on the dials and cases and stuff like that. So we've been thinking about that for a long time, and I'm hoping that comes out late summer, early fall from Vortic. And I'm still trying to figure out, I hope everything I just said makes sense. I'm still trying to figure out where that fits in our brand portfolio and how we still call it a Vortic, because a lot of people now associate Vortic with pocket watch conversion. So just trying to make sure we do that right. But honestly, most of it's just gonna be sold to our current customers who follow us, and they're just gonna be like,
support the brand. Yeah,
it's a little different. So
during obviously whenever you're coming on the podcast, we were spending some time doing some research, so that way we can have a valid conversation, right? That's a part of our process as being a podcaster, understanding our guest. And I saw some articles or some videos or something that obviously Mr. Wonderful is huge in the watch industry, and he was kind of like plastering your brand, and he was a fan, and I'm curious as to how that relationship started. Kevin O'Leary.
So the video, there's really one main video. I think he's worn the watch a couple other times, but he did a video with producer Michael, and I think if you Google Kevin O'Leary watch collection Vortic pocket watch or something, you'll probably get there. It's a YouTube video with producer Michael, and they sat down and went through like the current state of Kevin O'Leary's collection. And somewhere around, I think it's 17 minutes or so into that video, he got to his Vortic watch that he was just recently given, and worn on. He wore it on the first 2 or 3 episodes of season 13 of Shark Tank, and he just gushed about the watch. And he read the letter, like we wrote him a handwritten letter, sent him a sticker and stuff like that, and all this other stuff in the box. And he just gushed about how much he loved the watch, how it worked so well on TV. I mean, you cannot pay someone like that to advertise the way he did, and it was all organic, and that just happened all by accident. And that video has like 2 point some million views now, I think, maybe approaching 3 million. Is nuts. And we probably get 100 unique website visitors a day from that YouTube video.
Awesome.
Just from that little blurb. I mean, it was maybe a minute, in the middle of this 30-minute video. But to your point, he loves watches. He's a watch collector, and he specifically is a dial guy. He wants unique dials and one of a kind things that really stand out. And the way we got to him was one of my friends, I did actually a podcast with this guy, and he was on Shark Tank. His company is called MC Squared, MC Squares. And his name's Anthony. He makes really cool, sustainable and reusable whiteboards and sticky notes. So it's kind of like, imagine a sticky note sized whiteboard. Like he does that kind of stuff. Really cool little company, at that point, little, now it's huge. He went and he pitched that idea on Kickstarter, or not on Kickstarter, I'm sorry, on Shark Tank.
Yeah.
So he pitched on Shark Tank. Kevin O'Leary gave him a deal, live on air, super cool. And this guy, Anthony, emailed me and he said, hey, I want to buy Kevin. I know Kevin's a watch guy. I want to buy Kevin a watch to say thank you for investing in my company. And he did that just because he and I had a connection and we thought each other's products were cool. He's in Denver. So he was just like, yeah, let me support Vortic Watch Company. It's a cool thing. And I was like, I'm not going to take your money. That's the coolest thing ever. Where do I send the watch? And we found the coolest watch. The problem is Kevin only wears watches with red straps, and all of our leather is American made. And we don't have a whole lot that's red. We had one that was it was almost like a mistake. We had an orange strap that got made. We had a short run of orange made, and one of them was a little more red than orange. And for some reason, I set it aside, and I was like, yes, perfect. So we grabbed that one. We put it on one of the coolest watches we had. It was a Waltham pocket watch, and overnighted it to the Venetian because he said if you get it there by tomorrow, he might wear it on Shark Tank. So we're like, all right, let's do it. And then, all of a sudden, we saw that video, and then we saw a couple episodes of Shark Tank. So I have screenshots of Kevin O'Leary wearing the watch. Awesome. And then we have a couple red carpet appearances where he's wearing, you can tell it's a Vortic because it crowns at 12 o'clock and it really stands out on his wrist. So he has worn it a couple times, and I wouldn't say it's in his rotation because his rotation is next level, but
for sure.
it's in his active collection, and yeah, I got to meet him at the Watch Time event too in October. And I went up and introduced myself, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. He was like, oh yeah, the pocket watch. Cool. That's awesome. Nice to meet you. And he was so kind and so nice and so thankful. And I was just like, you don't know me, but you've helped me more than you can possibly know. And I'm just so, so grateful for you. And yeah, he was stoked, but he was about to go look at an MB&F watch. So I can't really compete. So.
As a watch brand, I mean, you dream to get your watches in the cases of collectors, right? Even if it's not the daily rotation or the top 3 or the top 5, but just the fact that you're in that same case, is epic.
And especially to be such a prominent public figure as well. I mean, that's like you said, that's free marketing for you, and it's genuine marketing, which is really cool. Yep. And I'm personally one of those guys. I watch TV shows or films or anything, and anytime somebody has a watch, I'm pausing it. My wife's like, "Dude, why are you pausing this?" And I'm like,
"Yeah, me too."
They're wearing,
yeah, what is that? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
I'm curious how many people are actually doing that and thinking, wow, that crown's at 12 o'clock. Like that's such an interesting
Yeah.
watch. What is that? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Probably,
I'm
probably the best story of that is Jack Ryan. So John Krasinski was wearing a military edition watch on season 4 of Jack Ryan, and Michael
Ooh,
Kelly, who's his co-star, wore a Vortic watch in season 3 and season 4 of Jack Ryan.
Mm.
But if you Google John Krasinski's watch, Jack Ryan season 4, or something like that, you're going to get to a Gear Patrol article that's all about the Vortic military edition that he wore in season 4. And now that we've had all of this conversation, you'll get a kick out of this. John Krasinski was wearing a Hamilton watch in season 1, 2, and 3. Took that Hamilton off and put on a Vortic military edition for season 4, which is also still a Hamilton. It was a Hamilton pocket watch made for World War II, turned into wristwatch, and
I see it. It's
and we're
beautiful.
how
we're doing some cool stuff. I don't know if I can share what we're gonna do with that watch, but I have the watch that John Krasinski wore on TV in our safe here, and we're gonna do something really special with it this year.
So
that's
cool.
awesome.
It's
How
such a
how
cool
the
watch. I
turns
love it.
have tabled.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Yep.
curious from
But
you,
yeah.
RT. What's your favorite restoration that you've done to date? I know that you've got to have a favorite. I'm sure Tyler does. I'm sure everybody does. But how about you personally?
So I'm a huge fan of our military edition. Every year we find pocket watches that were flown on B-17s and B-29s in World War II. It was called the Master Navigator's Watch. Hamilton made 120,000 of them for the U.S. Army Air Corps during the Second World War. And we tell that story we call it the military edition, but it's vorticwatches.com/military. We give a portion of those proceeds to that school in Delaware, the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative.
Awesome.
That whole project is really close to my heart. We release it at 12 noon Mountain Time on Veterans Day. It's the only time you can buy that watch. We usually sell out really quickly. Basically, I spend all year trying to find as many of them as I can, and then we release as many as we could make by that day. So last year we only did 30. This year I think we can get to 40, and we do let's say a 40-piece limited edition.
Right.
And every year they look different. I am wearing, I think, one of the most special ones, and I'll try to hold it up to the camera so you guys can see it.
Yeah, please.
Hamilton made most of them. This was our 2022 special edition, I think. But every year we use the same Hamilton movement and dial. So it's a black dial on a Hamilton pocket watch. And then we change the case and strap, and we make it look really cool and different every year. Some years, about 3 of the last 5 years, we've done a special edition of like 10 or 15 pieces on top of that are a little different. And this one was an Elgin. So Elgin didn't make very many of these military pocket watches, but this was a very special white dial version. They're all true 24-hour dials. And then this one, we changed all the second hands on these were blue, like the hands. We hand painted the red second hand on it to go full red, white, and blue. We did a solid bronze case, which you can tell is very patinaed at this point.
Yeah.
And then the movement's the best part. It's a fully gold plated, they called it gilt movement. And this was a railroad grade pocket watch movement made by Elgin. Back they were making them mostly in the 1930s. They called it the BW Raymond, and then they added this extra bridge and gear on the back to create this sweeping central second hand and the hacking feature. So they were all hacking second hands. And we made 15 of these and sold them for $12,000 a piece, and they sold out in, I think, 7 minutes.
Wow.
And we made one extra for spare parts just in case, and I get to wear it until we need it.
I love that dial because it's like the American version of the Type B Flieger dial, and of course it's a 24-hour hour indicator, which I mean is just awesome.
Yeah, awesome. And there were not. I mean, still today. I mean, if you want a true 24-hour mechanical watch, there are very few options, very few brands that make one. So that's one of the watches with Colorado Watch Company is called the GCT, and all of these say GCT on the dial, which is the precursor to GMT. It's called Greenwich Central Time, or I'm sorry, Greenwich Civil Time.
Mhm.
And GCT it's the same as GMT. It's the London Observatory. It was the central time zone for the Allied forces during World War II. So they all say GCT on the dial. We have learned our lesson from a trademark standpoint, and I went out and trademarked GCT now for modern watches.
Yeah.
And we have a watch in Colorado Watch Company called the GCT,
I saw that.
and
That's
it's
super cool.
basically a replica of this watch that I'm wearing. And we're gonna basically make replicas of every single military edition that we do. So all the different case colors, the dial colors, all this kind of stuff. I'm sure we'll do a gold back, gold movement at some point to
Yeah.
replicate this one. So that's going to be a really fun project, because every year we'll come out with a new military edition, and then all the time we can come out with new GCT watches with Colorado, and have a $10,000-$12,000 version that we only make a few of for Vortic, and then have a $1,800 version that we make for Colorado Watch Company. And there's an endless ideas in that world.
Yeah.
So really exciting.
We have our two final questions here for people that make it to the end of the podcast. We always like to give them some juice, right? So
You made it this far.
I know, right? It's like you deserve a prize.
Yep.
So where do you expect Vortic or Colorado Watch Company to be in the next decade?
Yep.
And then the second question I will leave from my brother here, Justin.
So I want to build the LVMH of American made. And when I say that, if you know Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy,
Yeah.
you know that they own, I don't know, 30, 40 brands that are all in the luxury space.
Right.
And that is a foreign company, not focused on American stuff in the slightest. And that's okay. That's what they do. I want to run a small group of companies, not just watch companies, but companies that make really cool physical products in the luxury space that are as American made as possible. And so that's some of the stuff I've been talking about with Abingdon and some other people in the watch industry. There are a lot of people in the watch industry that want to make more things in America, but it's really freaking hard to make even cases in the United States. I won't say who, but several companies that you are very familiar with have toured our facility here in Colorado once we put out our Colorado Watch Company stuff, and are basically begging us to figure out how to make cases for them, because they want to make more stuff in America.
That's awesome.
And so the demand is there. The consumers want it. Like, it's very evident from just our Kickstarter that like people want to invest in American made stuff. And I don't think it should be just one brand that does it. Like, I firmly believe, after all this stuff that I've been through, as the tide rises, all ships rise. And so I have a couple boats, but like, what if I had 10 boats,
Right.
and the tide could probably rise even faster. So that's when you ask, especially about 10 years from now, I mean, Vortic will be doing what it's doing, where it's a really cool business, because we can just, every day we make a new watch. So I don't have to constantly, come out with new products. Vortic can just be Vortic and make really cool pocket watches and wristwatches. Colorado Watch Company will probably be pretty big in 10 years, but still be making really cool stuff. And, made in America is our focus there. Hopefully more than 87% made in USA by then. That's the goal, is to get as close to 100 as we can. And then massive scale from that. And the third company we've been working on for a long time, or third brand, I guess I should say, that would be part of that portfolio of companies when we get there, is called Mechanical Products. And the idea of that is to make things for other people in the USA. So if you come to me and you want to start a watch company and you want it to be American made, we can make stuff for you. And we're not there yet. It's going to take a while, but like right now, we can make most of a watch in America. And we could absolutely put somebody else's brand on it and ship it somewhere else. So that private label and corporate gift industry is huge.
For sure.
And so we want to tap into that next and kind of help other people do what we've done. That's our third brand, if that makes sense.
That'll be great, man. I mean, essentially pioneering that space to make way for other people and helping them. Um, that's really cool. Honestly, it's nice of you guys to do that as well. Last question for you, RT, if that's okay, and we'll hopefully wrap things up after this. Are there any upcoming releases that you are willing to give us a taste about? I know that this will be public facing, of course, and you don't have to just give away all your Easter eggs and stuff. But anything neat that you're working on that you can give to the people?
Well, so our military edition for Vortic is always the thing that we're constantly iterating and making new stuff. The one thing, I don't know when it's going to come out. I want to do it at a time like that, like makes sense, from like celebrating an anniversary or of something military or something like that. But if you look on the military edition website, which is vorticwatches.com/military, you'll see last summer we called it the comparing watch. And we found just 6 pocket watches that were used by the US Navy and were off the coast of Normandy on D-Day. We called it internally the D-Day watch, but those pocket watches were used on Navy vessels to compare to the main clock on the warship. And there was an officer of the watch that would carry that pocket watch around and make sure that every timekeeping component on the vessel was accurate with the main clock. And it was literally called the comparing watch. And so we made 6 of them. They sold out really quickly, as you might imagine. Really cool piece of naval history.
It's a beautiful looking watch.
And they're gorgeous. Yeah. So another thing made by Hamilton made a lot of those military pocket watches. There's another version of that it's a very similar looking pocket watch, but it was made for the Royal Air Force during World War II, and it has the broad arrow from the Royal Air Force, or the British broad arrow, on it. And it's really cool, and I have a few of them. I'm trying to find more of them. And so I'm going to the Oshkosh Air Show, the largest air show in the world, in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is in July. And I'm hoping I can have at least one of those pocket watches that was flown by the Royal Air Force in World War II, turned into a wristwatch at that point. So
that'll be amazing.
That's one of my current projects. The other project I found is I have a business card on my desk from another one of the estate buyers, someone who's collecting pocket watches. But the U.S. Corps of Engineers made a railroad style pocket watch for World War I. And they made 1,000 of them, and the serial numbers were printed on the dial. So each one says the serial number of that pocket watch right on the dial, like 201 of 1,000. One of the coolest things I've ever seen, and they were mostly used in Canada. So they're Canadian dials. So they have the 24 markers in the inside ring. That's a huge project. Those are really expensive, even when I can find them. But, something with Canada Day, or I'm going to the Toronto Timepiece Show, which is the first of its kind, I think, in September. Nice. So if I can have just one of those, for that show, those are the 2 fun projects I'm working on for Vortic. And at this point, I'm just trying to find and collect as many of those types of pocket watches as I can, because those special editions are just, they're just so fun. Like, we get to tell so many cool stories about World War II, and in this case, World War I, and like the railroads in World War I. And gosh, it's a history lesson every time I make a watch. So that's the kind of stuff I work on.
Amazing. Yeah. I think we're gonna wrap this thing up. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that maybe you'd like to talk about before we close this and say our goodbyes?
I would just say, that if you want to learn more about Vortic and like follow along, like I said earlier, my passion and the thing that I'm really good at is marketing, specifically email marketing. I still send a weekly email newsletter, and that's me and my team putting together all the cool watches we made this week. So go to vorticwatches.com/newsletter and hop on that list. And that's the best way to learn about all this cool stuff they're working on. Other than that, that's it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and go deep on some of these stories. I appreciate the time you guys let me to expand on all that. So thank you for that.
That's what we're here for. We'll make sure to plug all the socials and the in the podcast description. And until then, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again, everybody.
Bye bye.